just last week, Apple announced one more thing. Its hotly anticipated headset Vision Pro. CEO Tim Cook called it the beginning of spatial computing. A few people who tried it said it was an out of this world experience, but we've actually been here before with previous VR and AR launches. Google Glass was a big flop, and nothing has come even close to the wild success of the iPhone. Here to discuss what's the future for VR and AR is Sam Cole. Sam is co-founder and CEO of FitXR, a fitness VR service. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Conrad. Thanks for having me on.
Sam, can you start by telling us a bit about what is FitXR?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to describe FitXR is to think about a virtual fitness club. So we've really tried to provide the widest fitness experience possible. We ourselves loved, in-person offerings like ClassPass that enabled us to go and try a variety of boutique fitness offerings, from boxing through to dance through to high-intensity interval training. And so we've really tried to bring that instructor-led boutique fitness feel to our product. And at the moment, we're the widest experience in the market today. We have classes across boxing, dance, high-intensity interval training, sculpt, and combat, as you can see in the video. Continuing to innovate in the space, continuing to grow the offering every day.
So, for people who've not tried FitXR or even VR experience, can you tell us what you will need to do? Let's say if I wanted to try out FitXR, do I have to buy something? Do I have to subscribe to the service?
Yeah, it's actually a lot easier than a lot of people think. So all that you'd need to do is to purchase a headset, like you can see the one over there, the Oculus Quest 2. That is priced at $300, and that is a completely standalone device. You don't need any additional equipment to access FitXR. And then FitXR is priced as a subscription at $9.99 a month on top of that.
Yeah, and you actually have trainers. Like, is this one of the group of trainers that you have?
Yeah, we have a great team of trainers, all based out in New York. Again, we've tried to take trainers that teach some of the top institutions in real life, whether that's Barry's Bootcamp, Equinox, Rumble, and bring those into our product experience. So they're a core part of our product experience today, to give you that feeling of being present in a boutique fitness class, but in a completely gamified and reimagined setting.
I can't even pretend to know what Rumble and Sculpt mean, but I'll take your word for it that it involves a lot of sweat and is good for my body. But Sam, can you tell us a bit about what got you started in terms of thinking of developing FitXR?
Yeah, so actually prior to doing the MBA up at Cambridge, I was really intrigued about VR and AR and how they could be the next computing platform. This is almost 10 years ago, and I started playing around with an early Oculus developer kit and a spin bike. I was intrigued to see whether bringing this immersive element to fitness would make it easier to get into a flow-like state. Basically, it would make it easier to exercise by making it fun and engaging. And just off really limited tests with some of the really early hardware, I formed a lot of conviction around that, and then went off and did my MBA, where I was really fortunate to meet my co-founder, Samir, persuade him to come and work on this with me post-MBA. And yeah, that was kind of the start of the experience. From there, we then spent a lot of time prototyping around different experiences. So for us, ever since the beginning, we've been interested in being more than just a single vertical fitness experience. So like I said before, we started prototyping with spin. We also played around with boxing. And then today, we have many, many different verticals represented in the fitness experience today.
Yeah. So what has that journey been like in terms of from starting with those early prototypes to where you are now?
It's certainly been a journey. The hardware has come a long way, and what we can do with that hardware has also progressed significantly. I really think about the first major inflection point that we went through from a hardware perspective was the arrival of the Quest 1 headset, which was the, I keep on pointing in the wrong direction, the predecessor to this one. And that was the first standalone device that was released by Meta. And why I think that was so transformative was it was intuitive and it was accessible and it was priced affordably. And so for the first time, VR became capable of any kind of mass market adoption. I talk about this a lot as being the first moment that I could send a headset back to my mum in New Zealand and she could unbox it and just use it. Up to that point, it was inaccessible for her to do that. And then we had, the arrival of the Quest 2 headset, which kind of overlapped with COVID, which was another big moment, I suppose, for the wider industry as people looked for different ways to work out at home, different ways to entertain themselves at home. And with those standalone devices, it just meant that we were able to provide content that was probably more freeform, so we could utilize your space around you more easily. You weren't tethered to a computer, so you had more flexibility in that regard. And also, we saw our demographic shift really significantly from being a younger male audience that was really focused on, had purchased a headset for gaming reasons, and then had found fitness as a secondary benefit. So we started to see this fitness first demographic buying headsets to use our product, which was amazing to see. And so then our audience grew in age, it grew in volume, it grew in age, and it also became more balanced in terms of gender split. And so that enabled us to lean into that and say, like, let's try and provide the widest experience possible here to serve the widest audience. And something that we're really proud of today is the fact that from a fitness ability perspective, our audience is extremely varied. So we have a third of our customers coming to Fitxr being completely sedentary prior to finding us. And those are the customers that we have, the biggest impact on, because they say things like, I hated the idea of going to the gym. I never found fitness engaging. And I put the headset on with Fitxr and I got lost in the experience for the first time. I took it off after 30 minutes and I felt great. I was drenched in sweat and my muscles ached. And that's a first for many of these customers, which is why it's so transformative. But equally, we serve at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. We serve a third of our customers who are exercising 5+ times a week before they find Fitxr. And for those customers, Fitxr slots into an existing fitness routine. And many report that it becomes the most fun and engaging part of that routine. So yeah, we're really proud of the fact that we serve a super broad audience.
I mean, we'll talk about your journey in terms of Fitxr, how it scaled later on. But we could take this question from Rosalia in Singapore, who says, the beauty of such classes are actually your exercise mates. How have you been able to replicate this, to give that motivation when you just don't feel like going to the gym?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think about the core motivational elements of a boutique fitness class are a great instructor, a great soundtrack, a great environment, and exercising synchronously with other people. And so we replicate those first three elements, as you've seen in some of the product images and videos that Conrad's shown. But I think the fourth element is something that we uniquely bring to our fitness offering, which is that in every experience, you are surrounded with other player avatars who have played the experience before you. And so you always feel like you're in there present with others, synchronously working out together to bring in that strong motivational force that I think we agree is a core component of group fitness. We also have a multiplayer mode as well. So I've challenged Conrad, prior to coming on here to a boxing class together. So we'll have to get him a headset, and then Conrad and I could literally be talking to each other as we were progressing through one of our classes together. So yeah, we also have live multiplayer too.
Okay, I'm not gonna take any bets about who's gonna win this boxing match. But actually, it brings me to a question: is if you put on this headset, you can't see your surroundings. How, when you're doing fitness, how are you not gonna run into a wall or kick over a vase?
Yeah, so we've designed all of our experiences to work in a space of about 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters. So there is some lateral movement, particularly in our high intensity interval training studio. But for the most part, our studios require a pretty stationary body movement. That enables us to serve customers all around the world, from people who have large living rooms in the United States to people who have tiny apartments in Tokyo. And that, again, is something that we're really proud of. I think the headsets as well, if you haven't tried some of the Guardian systems on the headsets are pretty advanced. And so what you're asked to do when you put a headset on for the first time is map your room space, and it will alert you if there's any objects in that space that might cause you to have a collision or to obstruct your movements. And so if you get close to your walls or a desk or whatever it is, the Guardian system of the headsets will alert you that you're getting close, and you'll be able to see and come back into the center of your play space. So yeah, fortunately, it's a bit of a rarity, I think, for people to hit the walls or to hit their vases or anything else.
And what is that minimum distance that you need for Fitxr, a Fitxr workout?
We state that it's about 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters, but Fitxr is something that I love especially when I travel. And so I was traveling last week, and I'm able to put the headset on in a really small hotel room, and because I suppose I'm more confident in what is the movements that are going to be required. You can actually do that in a much more condensed space as well. So yeah, I think it's great for people who are traveling. I think it's great for people who have small space constraints. And yeah, there's probably a surprising or counterintuitive thing when you think about exercising with the headset on.
I think many people have taken computing classes before, programming, so people are kind of familiar with how to create an application for mobile or for desktops. What is involved in creating this immersive environment for VR?
Yeah, so I suppose in many ways it's pretty connected to mobile game development, where you would essentially build 3D worlds and 3D experiences, but then you would render that on a 2D screen. So we build all of our experiences on the game engine Unity, and that enables us to build in that manner, where we're building immersive 3D experiences. And yeah, I mean, Unity's been a great tool for us. I think they power about 70% of the VR and AR market. So as a game engine, they're a dominant force in that space.
So I mentioned earlier about Apple's VisionPro headset that they unveiled, and their marketing has been quite unique, I would say, quite different from a lot of what people might think of VR and AR. And before we talk a bit about that, I just want to play this clip from Scott Galloway when he was asked. Before the launch, he said he predicted VisionPro would be one of the biggest tech flops of all time. After the launch, this is what he had to say.
Well, a lot of people would argue, well, that means this will work. I would argue it means that this is likely to fail, because I think reversion to the mean is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. In addition, I'm sticking to my guns here. I think this thing doesn't work. And at some point, we just admit that people don't want to put shit on their head. And I think it's just a violation of basic anthropology. And that is the only things we will put on our face are devices that make it less likely we will be eaten because we can see and or make money because we can read, that is glasses, or that make us more likely to have a random sexual encounter because they increase the elevation of our cheekbones, which makes us more attractive to mates.
So Sam, I want to ask you whether a VR headset makes you more attractive to mates, but I think the question here is the mass market has certain perceptions of VR and AR, driven by, let's say, Google Glass, those Google Cardboards, and maybe some previous experiences. I myself felt nauseous when I tried a VR headset 5-6 years ago. Do you think that now is the right time for the mass market to embrace VR or AR?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose, fortunately, Prof. Galloway has a track record of being horribly wrong on some of these things, and so when you become an internet meme for being incorrect on your hot takes, I think that says something about your hot takes in general. I would wonder what he would say about the same thing in relation to people wearing AirPods or people wearing headphones before they arrived on market, because I remember when I first saw people wearing AirPods when I was in New York at the time, it looked strange, it looked shocking. Yet roll forward 3 weeks, and after Apple plastering all of these celebrities wearing those devices everywhere, they get readily adopted very quickly. One of the main kind of inspirations or catalysts for me, moving from private equity and kind of taking the plunge and pursuing Fitxr more fully, was I remember I was in a weights room of a 24/7 gym, and I saw everyone inside that space wearing headphones, and I thought to myself, we would never call that augmenting your reality, but in a way, it is exactly that. People are bringing in an audio experience to enhance what was otherwise a pretty dull and uninspiring place. And I just thought to myself at the time, like, I really believe the next computing platform is going to be some kind of headset or glasses. And then this whole space could be transformed with a highly personalized, really immersive and engaging visual layer. And for me, I just became convinced at that moment that someone was going to build that future state. And so I had to give it a go myself and try and do it. But I think you're right more broadly. Like, Apple has come into the space and rebranded. They've used different terms to describe the kind of same base technology that we have with Meta and other players in the market. So you didn't hear any mention of virtual reality in their keynote. You didn't hear any mention of the metaverse. And instead, you heard a lot of talk about augmented reality and a lot of talk about spatial computing. And I think that is obviously very intentional. And I think it's about trying to reposition this space as something different to what we had before. I think your experience around, getting nausea on an old device, I think is particularly telling and relevant. And I think it speaks for many people in terms of they might have tried a Google Cardboard, close to 10 years ago. And many of those people tried roller coaster experiences as well. And so it was like a double whammy. It was like really early hardware that wasn't really capable of delivering that kind of experience, and then a content on top of that was particularly nausea inducing. And so for many people to go have a bad experience, then they haven't, up until this point of time, come back and taken a second look at virtual reality. And I think Apple's arrival into this space will get many people to ask that question. Maybe I should come back and try what has happened in this space. And I think many people will be completely blown away. I've done thousands of demos of Fitxr, and I've never had one person complain about nausea. I think that but equally, I think that if I was walking down the street and I was just talking to people and I said, what do you think about virtual reality headset? I would get a mixture of responses of, it's only for gaming, it's a fad, I tried it once and it gave me nausea. And then maybe the fourth or fifth person might say, I love it, it's great. And I'm a true fan. And I think what's going to be so powerful about Apple's arrival into this space is if you couple the kind of the rebranding, the repositioning of the technology, you sprinkle on top some of Apple's marketing magic, where I think we'll see more of that to come as we build up to this launch window. You then throw in their extremely comprehensive retail network globally. And what I think is going to happen is when this device launches early next year, you're going to have queues outside of Apple showrooms of people trying this experience. The tech press reports are all overwhelmingly glowing. And I think that's interesting in of itself, because I think a lot of those journalists went to that event on Monday and were skeptical. They were skeptical about VR and AR. They were skeptical about Apple's ability to come in and wow people. And they were skeptical about the price point, which we knew was likely to be expensive prior to that event. Yet the reports afterwards from everyone who has tried that device are overwhelmingly positive. Many wowed, many journalists completely speechless. And so I think if you then pass that on to the general public, like I think if you tried a Vision Pro, I think you'll be completely blown away. But I also think if your last experience was a Google Cardboard, I think you would also be blown away by the kind of entry-level headsets like the Quest 2 or the Quest 3, which is launching later this year. And so I think many people will go and try a Vision Pro. They will determine that, hey, this is amazing technology. At $3,500, it's not for me right now. And I think many will go away and say, well, what's an entry-level device that I can get I can get into my home right now, and they'll end up buying a Quest 2 headset or a Quest 3 headset. So we really expect the arrival of Apple and the launch of this device to raise the entire industry in terms of awareness and then ultimately headset sales.
Romit says Galloway is a huge old man screaming at the clouds energy. So, but Sam, you were at Apple Park last week. You didn't get to try the headset, but what was the vibe amongst developers, amongst people that you met about this new age of spatial computing?
I think there's a lot of general optimism. For anyone who's been in this space for as long as we have, we've seen many ups and downs. I think in many ways, VR, like a lot of early stage technologies, really closely maps to the Gartner hype cycle. And we've definitely had a lot of initial hype in kind of 2015, 2016. We then definitely went through a wave of trough of disillusionment. And then we've had little mini peaks and mini troughs since then. And I think post Meta changing their name, Zuck coming out and speaking a lot about the metaverse and why they were spending so much money in this space. I think as markets shifted, we started to see the kind of this headline around like the metaverse is dead, VR and AR is dead. The sentiment of Zuck should be spending all of that money on AI and not on the metaverse. And so I think for people like ourselves in the industry, I think also for people, working on the hardware side of things as well, I think there was a lot of validation about Apple entering this space, validation that, more people, it's not just Meta here who firmly believe that the next computing platform is going to be a headset. Apple are also joining this vision with a very clear statement of intent around what the future looks like. I think you'll see more companies coming into the space and announcing headsets following the Apple announcement. So we think there's going to be a steady flow of press around new manufacturers coming into the space towards the end of this year. But yeah, I think the thing that was most telling for me out there last week was just how blown away the press were, because I spoke to a number of journalists, following demos of the device, some of whom were completely speechless. And these are not people who have never tried the device before or tried VR before. These are people who are experts in this field. And they were blown away by things like spatial photographs that felt like memories. And I think those things were really exciting to see, right? Like a level of excitement from industry insiders and from pundits that know a lot about this space, I think was super exciting for anyone involved in the industry.
We've got another question from Romit, and he's asked, do you envision a future where we become immortal inside of a metaverse? So almost using AI and a person's everyday data, replicate that on an avatar online.
It's a really interesting thought. I certainly believe that that people currently aren't connecting to data points here that are very connected. I really believe that the best place to consume some of this generated AI content is going to be in a headset, just because the levels of immersion and presence are so powerful. NVIDIA released a demo recently of one of their NPC game avatars being able to talk and interact as part of a gaming experience. And it was incredibly powerful. But I just thought to myself at the time, that's great if I'm watching that on my TV or my phone, but that's easily 10 times better if I'm in that space with that person, talking to that person who is an AI-enabled avatar, like they're a person that I would encounter walking down the street. And I think as those dots between generative AI and VR and AR kind of get more connected, I think there's some super exciting things that we're going to see in that space. And maybe this is one of them.
Yeah, it's almost like every day, every couple of months, we see Black Mirror playing out in real life. Yeah, we have
I
a
mean,
question
like
from.
people said
Oh,
that as
sorry.
well,
Go ahead.
right? Around people said that as well around like the spatial photos that Apple showed and being able to live this memory, like that is very Black Mirror-esque. Um, but then I also heard some comments which I thought were relevant as well, which is like, you know, the first time you saw a dad with a massive camcorder trying to record his children, that kind of looks similarly strange, right? And then it just becomes an accepted social norm. I certainly spend a lot of time on my phone capturing things that my kids are doing. Um, so yeah, I think these kind of new technologies and what they enable very often seem strange and provocative when you see them for the first time, before they kind of slide into more readily and accepted norms.
We have a question from one of our MBA alums, Rishi. Rishi asks, a key constraint of the rapid expansion of VR headsets is the underlying connectivity bandwidth. What level of telco or broadband investments do we need to see before this connectivity supports the capability of these devices? When is that tipping point?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I see that as a major thing that needs to change, for more widespread adoption. So I certainly think that 5G enabled headsets and being able to pass more of the compute into the cloud than on the actual device is interesting. Interesting because you should be able to get more affordable, lighter weight, devices to people. And in certain markets, I think that is probably more impactful than in others. But I don't know if this is this massive tipping point. And I think actually what I think is more interesting in the relationship with telcos and the hardware providers is the use of many telcos, like what Apple have, you know, vast retail networks globally. And I think it's one thing to see these experiences on a 2D screen. It's completely different to try Fitxr, or for that matter, really any VR experience with a headset on. And we see this really clearly in our data, where people are much more likely to buy a headset and subscribe to Fitxr having tried it in person. And so I think that relationship with hardware providers and with the telcos is a really interesting one, where you'll start to see more headsets in telco showrooms, and the ability for people to demo, and then also put these headsets on financing packages like what they would have with smartphones. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Coming back to Rosalia's question goes back to Fitxr, how you were building, I think more the strategy point of Fitxr, which is, her question is the fitness industry. So that's gyms, yoga studios, all of that. It's very well established. So what were your strategies to disrupt these big established players?
Yeah, I think part of that is kind of what I was saying before, in our ability to serve who we would call the underserved. And so I think the fitness industry in general, and even all of the connected fitness companies that you've seen come to market over the last 10 years, I think do a really good job of serving the 20% of the population who is readily active, exercising and spending on fitness. But I think there's obviously the 80% of people that aren't exercising that we think of as currently underserved. And they're underserved because fitness has been packaged in a way where it seems like, you know, you have to go out and work out for 30 minutes plus. You have to buy into these notions of no pain, no gain. Like it has to feel difficult. It has to feel challenging. And I think that's kind of a mantra that we want to disrupt. We much prefer simpler, a simpler mantra of just going out and sweating every day. And in fact, some of the research that we've seen recently, through one of our advisors, who's great, he's the most cited exercise researcher in the world, this guy called Professor Brennan Stubbs. He's recently done some work to demonstrate that, you know, you get a significant mental health benefit from exercising for just 15 minutes. And so this idea of snackable fitness, this idea of repositioning fitness as fun and engaging, not something that has to feel difficult, and this idea that, hey, we should be trying to build a habit around this, and just the most important thing, whether you're doing it inside Fitxr or whether you're doing it in a combination of Fitxr and something else, the most important thing is that you're going out and you're trying to form a habit around fitness, and you're sweating every day. And so we think that enables us, coupled with a product experience that works really well, and we've seen it work really well with people who aren't exercising prior to Fitxr, is a core part of how we can take on the wider market. But in reality, we actually think about it as increasing the total addressable market of the fitness industry at large. And so when we talk about this internally, we say things like, hey, we don't really think about Peloton as being our competition. We think about our competition as more like being the couch, because it's a lot easier to sit there and watch Netflix than it is to do any form of fitness. And so if we can get people to say, I'm going to take some of my entertainment time and I'm going to use that in Fitxr, I think that's much more powerful.
And I think that might be what Mohammed Safan was asking in terms of what competition does this create, that you're not competing against Gold Gym or Peloton, but you're competing against all that Netflix consumption. I hope I interpreted that question, Mohammed. If not, you can just put in another comment about this. I think, when you're talking about this snackable fitness, I'm a subscriber to Apple Fitness Plus, and I would presume once VisionPro goes out, launches, that will be one of the services. How does Fitxr compete when they are on a platform like Meta or Apple's, where both companies have their own fitness services? How are you able to compete when they've got their own standalone businesses?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And like you alluded to, Meta has, they purchased our biggest competitor, a company called Supernatural. So that acquisition closed after being challenged by the FTC, closed recently. And so both Meta and Apple have, first party fitness content and fitness developers. I think for us, we see ourselves as pretty differentiated to what Supernatural and what we assume, and we don't know anything about this, but what we assume Apple Fitness might look like in the device. We've really tried to go down a route where we've really focused on gamification. We've really focused on a level of personalization in our product experience that is different to what we think is going to be present in both those. I think for us as well, just by virtue of not being singly tied to one platform, opens up a huge amount of possibilities. So it enables us to be truly cross-platform. We can go wherever our customers want to find us, and we can be device agnostic in that way. So one of the things we're proud of at Fitxr is the fact that we've ported our experiences to many VR platforms over time. An earlier version of our product is available on PlayStation. We've recently ported Fitxr to ByteDance's headset manufacturer, which is a company called Pico. We'll be bringing Fitxr to the VisionPro, and obviously we work very closely and very very well with a very deep and established relationship with Meta.
We had one last question, I think, from Prathifa, which is, what about constraints from rising costs or pressure on consumers when they're just juggling budgets? Will they pay for something like Fitxr again?
Yeah, I certainly think that for any company, but I think especially for consumer companies at the moment, rising costs due to inflation globally is a pretty topical point. I think for us, we feel that Fitxr offers great value at $9.99 a month, and that fitness in general as a category has seemed to be relatively recession-proof over time. It's many people treat it as a fairly essential spend, and will cut other things that are more luxury spend before they get down to fitness. I also think, like what I alluded to before, the ability to finance headset and Fitxr in one is something that we're pretty excited about, just because that brings the cost down even further, or allows you to spread that cost, I should say. So there's not that significant upfront cost. I think if you then compare, the cost of Fitxr compared to like a Peloton bike, for example, both headset or hardware and subscription are both significantly cheaper. Or if you comp to, the cost of going to boutique fitness classes or even gym memberships, I think we're also considerably cheaper than. So we really hope that we can provide a really cost-effective offering for people, even with a view here about the combined hardware and software cost.
I would assume this is the sort of question that you get from VCs who are looking at investing into VR and AR. I guess that's one of the questions. What have you been hearing from VCs who are maybe excited about what Meta, what Apple is doing, and are looking to get into the VR space? What are their questions?
Yeah, I think many VCs have I think their own investment thesis around VR and AR has pretty closely matched that Gartner hype cycle that we talked about before. So funding into the space has gone through definite waves. You saw a lot of funding come into the space in 2015 and 2016. You saw some funding come into the space again. There was probably another bit of a blip around the end of 2021. I think a lot of funds right now are trying to learn around what, with Apple's arrival in the space, what does this do in terms of the market of headset sales? How does this evolve over the next 10 years? And I think many funds are still coming up with their own view about what that means for their own investments in this space. We've found in general that I think when funds dig into this area for the first time, many are shocked by, what successful businesses have already been built. I think many VCs think about the space as pretty small and underdeveloped. And so I think there's a lot of surprise when they see some of the actual growth and revenue figures that exist in this space, already. I think, there's been some really interesting publicly shared information around this recently, where you've seen some of the first really successful free-to-play games generate north of $20 million in 6 months through in-app purchases. And so I think that's really exciting. That kind of tells you that the market is starting, at least at its early stage, starting to move from a world like what we had with mobile, where we had relatively expensive premium download experiences, and then those faded away, and then we had the rise of subscription and the rise of free to play. And I think we're starting to enter that phase in VR and AR. And so I think, again, I think you'll see more reports of public reports of businesses being super successful in this space, and I think that will draw in more and more investors.
I saw on LinkedIn that Fitxr, you've grown a lot, and you think you're going to be growing a lot more. What do you think are the kinds of skills that people who are thinking about getting into the VR space will need?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Conrad, but for anyone listening who's interested in what we're talking about, please go along to our careers page, and whether you see a job posting, we're actively recruiting for a number of positions at the moment. But if you see a job posting that's relevant, then great, please apply. If you don't, then please apply anyway. We love to get applications from people who, maybe we don't have a position right now that's of interest, or maybe someone's just so great we make a position for them. So please check that out. Yeah, I think in terms of skill sets, I think the space is still relatively new, and so we still find ourselves recruiting, a fairly broad range of people who have, years of virtual reality experience and augmented reality experience to none across a range of fields. And so I also think there's a lot of crossovers with what we're doing with other industries, obviously with fitness in general. And so we have a lot of people that come from the fitness space. We have a lot of people that come from the video gaming industry. We have a lot of people that come from just the broader tech industry or consumer tech. But in reality, I think because this space is so new and evolving so quickly, some of the core attributes that we look for are people that are able to, people who are smart, hungry, ambitious, able to work independently and autonomously, and just really keen to learn and grow and help us achieve our mission of, we want to be the world's most widely used fitness product, and really, like I said before, kind of attack this notion of some of the traditional mantras that we think hold the fitness industry back, and really see our competition as the couch. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to join our mission, then we'd welcome you to come along and check us out.
And I think that's the URL, fitxr.com. So for anyone who's interested.
And our careers page is part of that as well, so check that out.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for giving us that wonderful oversight about how the VR AR industry has developed and the exciting potential of Apple's Vision Pro, but also of Meta's products and the whole industry. The balance sheet will be back actually tomorrow at our regularly scheduled time, 12:45 to 1:30 UK time, and we will have a talk by one of our finance faculty, Bang Nguyen, who will be talking about digital currencies. What are they? Are they just a solution looking for a problem? And what are people still interested now that crypto has gone through the same hype cycles that Sam was talking about? Well, till then, till tomorrow, please stay safe and we'll see you next time.